in a lot of Western countries, there are other ethnic groups and races that consistently outperform white people in almost every area. And yet we don't talk about their privilege, do we?
Well, darling, when you use facts and logic, you tend to not talk about things that don't exist. Hey y'all, it's your girl Don Dos Cielo here. Welcome back to my channel. We are now currently, I think, 326 subscribers deep in the domination. So thank you all for subscribing if you already have. If you haven't, just go ahead and take a moment right now to just go ahead, like, comment, leave a comment down below, share, and subscribe. Okay, I make new videos every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. And sometimes other days if I have the time. But 3 videos a week is pretty hectic.
So I previously did a video about dispelling a conservative named Sydney Watson trying to say that white privilege is dumb or doesn't exist. And I'll link that down below if you haven't seen that video before. It's one of my conservative takedowns, so go on that playlist as well, and I'll link that down below as well, even though it's will be in it. There's also a big conservative talking point they've always used for the years and years and years ago. But you can find even more older footage of conservatives, both public figures and people in my real life, Tyler, using this notion of Asian privilege, or saying that, oh, because Asian people earn more money or more educated than white people on average, that, oh, why isn't we talking about Asian privilege? But obviously, we have a system that's obviously not built to, accustomed to Asian culture, and we're gonna get into why this idea is problematic and why it doesn't exist. If you've never heard this point before, I'm just gonna go and show a couple of clips.
Talking Points does not believe in white privilege. However, there is no question that African Americans have a much harder time succeeding in our society than whites do. Whites 4.5% for Asians. So, do we have Asian privilege in America? Because the truth is that Asian American households earn far more money than anyone else. The median income for Asians, close to $69,000 a year. It's $57,000 for whites, $33,000 for blacks. So the question becomes, why? And the answer is found in stable homes and an emphasis on education. 88% of Asian Americans graduate from high school, compared to 86% for whites and just 69% for blacks. That 18% of Asian children live in single-parent homes, compared to a whopping 55% for blacks and 21% for whites. So there you go. That is why Asian Americans, who often have to overcome a language barrier, are succeeding far more than African Americans, and even more than white Americans. Their families are intact, and education is paramount. Is how to speak properly and how to act respectfully in public. If African American children do not learn those things, they will likely fail as adults. They will be poor. They will be angry. And they often will be looking to blame someone else. One caveat, the Asian American experience historically has not...
Whites are doing well is because we cheated.
Yeah.
But if you look at the data of Asians, for example, you will find way more Asian privilege than there is white privilege. Asians make way more money than whites. They're way more educated than whites. They are less likely to experience any kind of crime than whites are. They're less likely to die at work than whites are. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, they suffer from a different sort of racial stereotyping.
Well, they don't suffer. They're kicking our ass. Everything you can say about white privilege is more true with Asian privilege. No one grabs their purse when...
It still pigeonholes them.
Pardon?
It still pigeonholes them.
Pigeonholes them as successful? I don't think anyone minds being pigeonholed like...
Let's face it, there's been Asian privilege in this country since the very founding. Our founders were rich Asian men who came along and wrote the Constitution specifically for the benefit of Asians.
Old and young alike, conservatives like to put the same talking point that, oh, because Asian families earn on average more money than white families, that and then they're more educated, that we live in the Asian world and it should be Asian privilege. But obviously that's not true. So to fully understand the context of what's going on or why they feel this way, we need to look at the love-hate relationship the U.S. has had with Asian immigrants.
Of Asians has always been takeover, invasion, that Asians will overwhelm California and the West Coast.
And a lot of this yellow peril was kind of this racist, nativist, white American fear that the Chinese and any other Asian Americans, because you know they can't tell them apart. Let's be real here. At least not back then, they can tell them apart. It was a fear that they're going to take over and then change the Western way of life and try to like suppress Christian values. So that's why that was used a lot of propaganda for anti-Chinese, anti-Asian resentment in the U.S. at that time. And we actually have a few massacres. I'm gonna link the article down below. We have the Chinese Massacre of 1871 in Los Angeles, California, known as the worst lynching in U.S. history. Back in 1871, Los Angeles was still small, numbering only about 6,000 people in population. Only about 200 were Chinese. Most of these people lived in the Calle de los Negros, named for the Spaniards who occupied the land, and together they formed a Chinatown of sorts. Two rival Chinese businessmen were arguing over a woman, and a shootout ensued, resulting in the death of a white civilian aiding the responding police officers. So this Chinese people hid in a Cornell building, Chinese hid in a Cornell building, but were forced by an angry white mob, and this mob grew in size and power, setting up gallows and turning wagons upright and lynching those unfortunate enough to be present. 18 men were killed, only 1% in the shootout. So because one Chinese man accidentally shot one white man when they were trying to shoot another Chinese person, yeah, it's just crazy people. That makes sense. So while all the rioters were put on trial, all charges were dropped on a technicality, leaving 18 deaths unanswered for. It sounds familiar to me. On September 2nd of 1885, 150 white miners in Rock Springs, Wyoming, brutally attacked their Chinese co-workers, killing 8, wounding 15 others, and driving several more out of town. Miners working in the Union Pacific coal mine had been struggling to unionize and strike for better conditions over years. But at every juncture, the railroad company would best them. So basically, searching for a scapegoat, the miners said to blame the Chinese. The Chinese were hard workers, but the Union Pacific had initially brought many of them to Rocks. Oh, they were scabs. Ooh, that makes sense kind of now. That makes a little bit more sense. There's a little bit more sense why there's a tension there. So at least it says here in the article, which I'll link down below, of course. Strike breakers, which honestly is another code, it's code word. It's a polite way of saying scabs. And if anyone knows about protest culture, so basically, a company will if you protest your job, company will send in people to replace you for the time being until you guys work out an agreement with the union. So, but strangling is basically they're saying they were kept. Basically, the Chinese were scabs. Basically, is what has happened here. So, and they really just showed little to no interest in being part of the miners' union. And I see it from both sides. You don't have to kill them, but at the same time, I would be very wary of trusting these white people. I think for good reason. A mob of angry white miners impulsively decided to strike back by attacking the Rock Springs small Chinatown. Many people fled for oh my gosh. Oh gosh, they fled for the hills, and but those who fled escape in time were brutally beaten and murdered. How? Ugh. Widely blamed for all sorts of social ills. The Chinese were singled out by politicians. It's just... Again, a lot of anti-Asian sentiment in the U.S. at this time. Filipino people were regarded as, unclean and uncivilized, right? And then, of course, we know with World War II and the Pearl Harbor attack on Hawaii from Japan, that definitely raised more anti-Asian and more specifically anti-Japanese sentiment. We also have the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which actually was the first law ever passed that barred immigration solely based on race, because of all the anti-Chinese sentiment that was in the country at the time. So with the attack on Pearl Harbor, made a lot more anti-Asian sentiment in the U.S. for all Asian immigrants, especially the Japanese. They would say, damn, there's a phrase they would use. So actually, on February 19th of 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066 to incarcerate people under suspicion as enemies to inland internment camps. So the order also affected German and Italian Americans on the West Coast because they were like all like the Axis powers, right? But the vast majority of those incarcerated in 1942 were of Japanese descent. Sounds about white, and many of them were naturalized second and third generation American, not really American and not able to assimilate and kind of untrustworthy. But it makes a curious case, then how did they go from being social pariah, kind of like African Americans and Latinos, right, to then being the model minority? This changing tide comes with the change of immigration law. So originally in 1924, President Coolidge had signed the Immigration Act, which actually had put quotas on the number of immigrants that could come from certain countries. Under the new law, immigration being open to those with a college education and special skills, but entry was denied to Mexicans and disproportionately Eastern and Southern Europeans and Japanese. At the same time, this legislation had allowed more immigration from Northern European nations such as Britain, Ireland, and Scandinavian countries. Quota was set that limited immigration to 2% of any given nation's residents already in the U.S. as of 1890, a provision designed to maintain America's largely European racial composition. And so then later on in 1927, the 2% rule was eliminated and a cap of 150,000 total immigrants annually was established. That law was barring a lot of people who were not white, making it more difficult for them to come into the U.S. But then when we get to the 60s, we have the civil rights movement happening. We have civil rights movements, we have Black Power, we have Chicano Pride, right, movements happening. And so with the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965, it's known as the Hart Keller Act, it had abolished these earlier quota system, abolished the earlier quota system based on national origin and established a new immigration policy based on reuniting families and attracting skilled labor to the U.S. Entering the U.S. is a new resolution became increasingly from countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These new Asian immigrants coming in with their families, and they work extremely hard to get a lot of education and get these high degrees or high skilled jobs. They're kind of seen as the people that, like, you know, they're like the true American dream. Like, they worked hard, they achieved what they wanted to achieve, and they didn't blame it on anything else, or they overcame the odds, and I guess they're like the champions, the underdogs that overcame. So this is where we kind of get this idea of the minority model myth for Asian Americans. But now we're going to get into why the model minority myth and this framing of Asian privilege is so dangerous. So number one, the idea of Asians being the model minority was just literally meant to discredit and disrespect African Americans, Latinos, Native American people that all had gripes with racism that was in the country, and as a way to denounce white supremacy that is obviously prevalent in the U.S. system.
From the very beginning, the model minority myth has been false flattery. It's not even really about people of Asian descent. It's a way to insult African Americans, Hispanics, and others.
But despite this stereotype of Asians as submissive and keeping their heads down, Asians have a long and storied history of civil disobedience in this country, which is often overlooked by the media. Americans, like Jews, are indeed a problem for the social justice brigade. How have bigoted white people allowed these minorities to do so well, even to the point of earning more on average than whites?
The model minority myth has always been used as propaganda, as a way to say, yes, we applaud the Asians, but really what we're doing is denigrating other racial minorities by saying, if Asians can do this, it means there's no racial discrimination, disparities don't count.
So even in the beginning clip you saw for yourself, that Bill O'Reilly said that Asian Americans and African Americans have had very different experiences in the barriers they faced in the U.S. as far as it comes to citizenship and as far as it comes to just being allowed to be here, or being allowed to, like, be a part of our country, you know? Reason number two is that we're really painting like a really broad brush on the Asian experience, or what it means to be Asian, or even Asianness, okay? Because if you look at the world, or the continent of Asia, there are 6 different regions. Okay, 6 different regions. But for the sake of this argument, we want to only talk about 4 of them, just because 2 of them, one being North Asia and one being West Asia, also as the Middle East, or they consider themselves racially Asian. That's not as far as I know. If anything, if anyone's something different, just leave a comment down below, because again, I'm open to learning. But from what I know, people in Northern Asia, which is like the Siberia, really consider themselves Asian, and then people in the Middle East don't consider themselves Asian, so we're not going to talk about them. We're going to exclude them from this part of the conversation because they only consider themselves racially Asian. When they get here, they get treated differently from the other groups. We're going to go over each region of Asia and tell you how many countries are in these regions. Okay? Like, it's a lot. Of course, the terming of the regions of Asia is kind of based on their proximity to Europe. So why, Middle East is called West Asia because it's the most western part of the sub-Asian continent. Okay, so we're gonna go west and work our way east, okay? So we first have the region of Central Asia, which is, I guess, probably like one of the least known, because it's probably the smallest, with 5 countries that were former Soviet republics. So we have Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. So that's 5 countries in Central Asia. We have probably the most known region of Asia, which is East Asia, which includes countries like China, Japan, Mongolia, North Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, also Hong Kong, which is part of China at this point in time, and Macau is a part of China, I believe, as well at this current time. So about 6 countries. And then also too, with these other like regions such as Hong Kong, and then also Macau, and also even just like in both China and India, there are various other minority ethnicities that are not necessarily like themselves like purely Asian or purely Chinese or purely Indian, so take that into account as well. And then these various minority groups exist across Asia and in various countries. Now, 11 countries so far that we know are Asian countries. Third region of Asia is going to be South Asia or Southern Asia. It is consisting of the nations of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And that region is a total of how many countries? In South Asia. In Southeastern Asia, we have people from Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, Myanmar/Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Brunei, and Timor-Leste, so that's making it about 11 countries in Southeast Asia. A big part of why I bring the countries up because there are disparities, across ethnic groups. So in a lot of these clips, they mention higher income rates for Indian families and Taiwanese families, right? But based on this article, this is by Sophie Kahn and Hui Xian Li, fellows at the Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality at Georgetown University Law Center. It's their article stating, "Stop pointing at Asian Americans to downplay racism at universities." So a big thing they mentioned here is that the poverty rate among Nepalese Americans is 20% higher. The poverty rate among Nepalese Americans is 21% higher than the official poverty rate. And then Hmong Americans are 20% less likely to have a bachelor's degree or more than the average American. In contrast, 70% of Indian Americans have at least a bachelor's degree, and their average household income is 80% higher than the American average. So the myth can use evidence against institutional racism. If Asians can do well, why any European nations need to apply themselves, but the upward mobility of Asian Americans over the past century was actually a result of post-war declines in labor market discrimination against them as compared to other minorities, which I think, that's interesting. Because there is kind of this brushing over of all Asian people as being rich and successful and very smart, people aren't looking at the disparities that there are different incomes of different ethnicities of Asian people have, and also too, they're kind of ignoring that, like, actually they're like the lowest, only about, so of all people on welfare, only about like 4% of people on welfare are like Asian, like 4%, like it's really small. So I'll link this article down below too. It says Asian Americans are falling through the cracks and data representation and social services. Asian American groups are often missing from data as well, to lead on poverty and access to social services. So including it in the research obscures the needs of those living in poverty and perpetuates the stereotype that few Asian Americans live in poverty or need social services. Right here it says non-Asian Americans are wealthy and social services aren't reaching all those in need. So despite assumptions that all Asian Americans are high earners, 12.3% of Asian Americans live below the poverty level, ranging from 6% of Filipino Americans to 34% of Burmese Americans, according to the American Community Surveys, and almost 20% of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders live in poverty. The large wealth gap between Asian American groups shows how the Asian American umbrella includes ethnic groups who vary substantially in economic status, tenure in America, and education levels. Differences are more significant when evaluating access to services for communities that need them. Lack of funding for Asian community organizations leads to Asian New Yorkers receiving insufficient and limited direct support to meet their social service needs. Limited funding and support can stem from various factors, including insufficient program outreach, given the stereotype that Asian Americans do not need public assistance programs, a lack of culturally appropriate services, and language barriers. It's a big one too. So SNAP removed 8 million people from poverty, reducing the poverty rate from 15.4 to 12.8%. Yeah, so I was right. So in 2015, 2.6% of SNAP recipients were categorized as Asian American, even though 4 to 5% of people in poverty in the U.S. are Asian American. So only about half of them are actually getting the help they need, that are people that are actually in poverty. So ethnic groups can vary widely across their SNAP and other public assistance programs. Some ethnic groups receive higher rates than others, so it's like, although Malaysian Americans had a poverty rate of 25.1%, only 3% of Malaysians receive SNAP. See this part where this is the problem of the minority, because people aren't getting the help they need. So now only 2% of Thai Americans are receiving SNAP, but our poverty rate's at 16.7. So you see these kind of disparities here, they're really not getting the help they need at all. And so basically we're just talking about why we need to fairly make sure that research is being done. Asian American communities to be properly counted, and so they can get the help they need to get out of poverty. The third problem with this minority myth, Asian privilege, is that it's really blindly ignoring the still current discrimination that Asian people face today. There's still, especially with coronavirus being from China, people were very quick to quickly blame Chinese and say that people need to go back to China and they need to block migration from China, which is not cool, which is not okay. Big issue for Asian Americans is this constant investigation of their culture and of them personally. Just because you love K-pop or J-pop or anime or whatever it may be from their culture does not mean you love them. It's a big difference between loving the culture and the people. So you make sure you love both the culture and the people. 5 ways Asian fetishes put Asian women in dangerous danger. Orientalism of screens that still perpetuates and fetishizes Asian women. So we have the mainstream media creates the submissive lotus blossom and evil lady dragon stereotypes, both meant to be demeaning and demonizing. So, you ever heard of the dragon lady? So the dragon lady, okay, Asian women are stereotyped as the, I've seen this before. You've seen these before. So the dragon lady is the one that seduces white men to lead to their downfall, and then we have the submissive lotus blossom. The mainstream media has created one-dimensional sexualized representations of Asian women that have affected the way they are perceived by others. These stereotypes are harmful. In the U.S., up to 61% of Asian women experience physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So being docile is specifically about being different and obedient, especially to the authority of men, as our race and sexuality have become ruled by Western and male fantasy. in order to serve men sexually, Asian women must both be feminine and heterosexual in order to, also submissive or homosexual. Labeling process, Oriental labels leads to the objectification of Asian women as exotic commodities. Seemingly faraway cultures and places begin by being defined by objects and artifacts. These so-called exotic aesthetics are in being opposed to people on their physical appearance. Similarly, Asian women have become defined by their jet black hair, dark almond eyes, or petite figure for their identification. So you have Madame Chrysanthemum, and then also like Madame Butterfly, where it just makes it so like Asian Americans seem docile and just like they just can't resist the white man. Like who can resist the white man? Like so powerful or so mighty. Another problem for Asian Americans is that they're not getting as much help also with mental health services.
Documented. That's 1.7 million people. That's about the size of Dallas, Texas. Many undocumented Asian immigrants would qualify for DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program introduced under President Obama. So why aren't more undocumented Asians coming forward?
They're kind of reluctant to seek help. They internalize the struggles they go through because they're expected to put on this outward appearance of being stable and being successful.
The stereotype of the model minority becomes internalized for many Asians in the US, and there are some pretty devastating consequences.
As a child, I remember having obsessive compulsive disorder and kind of using different like rituals, compulsions, and symptoms of that to kind of feel a sense of control in my own life in a world where I felt like I lacked control.
Asian Americans are also less likely to seek help for their emotional or mental health problems than white Americans. And US-born Asian women, even more so. They have a higher lifetime rate of suicidal thoughts than the general US population. That's almost 16% of Asian American women, as compared to 13.5% of the general population. The suicide death rates are 30% higher for Asian American girls and women between 15 and 24 than they are for their white peers.
But I think probably the fourth reason I think this is the most dangerous is that it's meant to divide us all. You know what I mean? It's meant to divide us up, Asian against Black, Asian against Latino, Asian against Indigenous. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's meant to divide us. And then we know what this comes from, and now we have better understanding of each other. Again, of course, I'm going to link all the articles down below. And I also found one too that talks about 6 ways Asian Americans can tackle racism, specifically anti-Black racism in their families. So if you want to be part of the solution and really be part of Black Lives Matter, this is where that we all have to do. So I'll link this article down below as well to talk about how you can talk to your family members who have some anti-Black racist thoughts. It's in every culture, so I don't feel bad in Asian Americans. I mean, I know. Like, I know. So, that is going to be it for today. But again, remember, don't let any conservative talking points get into your head. Remember what the history is and what the facts are. Yeah, and that's going to be it for today.
So if you've gotten this far, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe with your friends. Thank you for watching, and I'm enjoying this little clip from Banana and Akana clip. I love her. She's one of my favorite Asian YouTubers, or just one of my favorite YouTubers in general. She's like hilarious. Okay, bye.
Hey, I'm Anna.
I'm Brad.
What kind of white are you?
What?
Is it Irish? You look really Irie.
Irie?
Yeah, it's short for Irish.
All right, let's do some warm-up improv scenes. No suggestions.
You're under arrest for embezzling from Bank of America.
Throwing me under the bus, Officer Kelly? But you were the mastermind behind the whole thing.
Oh, you're gonna rat me out? Classic wimpy white man. Where's your honor?
Sword collection? Really? Your yellow fever's getting out of control, man.
Crush this beer can on your forehead, frat boy. For Delta U!
You know, I'm not really a religious person, but this Pope is pretty chill.
Yeah. I mean, I even started going to church.
Are you two?
Oh my God, it's the Pentecost priest! Get out of here! Get out!
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you not have a note on this?
Yeah. Super funny, Brad. But you could commit more. It seems like you're hesitating.
The initiations are pretty stereotypical.
Really? I didn't notice that.
Frat bro, embezzler, pedophile priest. I mean, I know these are the only portrayals of white men in media, but that doesn't mean that we're all like that.
Nobody's saying that, Brad.
It's just a little frustrating, you know, to not see someone who looks like me in class or on this stage. I mean, even at the higher levels, it's all just Asian women.
Hey, funny is funny, dude. It's not our fault that most people in improv are Asian women.
Funny is also subjective. I mean, you guys have a very particular sense of humor, and you're gonna identify with other Asian women.
Wait, are you saying we're racist?
Hey, my boyfriend's white.
No, not racist. Maybe unconsciously biased?
All right. I think we all heard Brad. Thank you for speaking up. But let's keep the politics out of here for a little bit and get back to work. Brad, why don't you initiate a scene?
Whoa, that new whey protein's really doing a number on your traps.
Yeah, wrap it up, broski. We're late for a Coldplay concert, and there are a bunch of women we need to shame into fucking us.
Really?
I'd still do them.